The deafening sound of the helicopter cut through the morning air of Manhattan as Robert Blackwood rappelled down the rope directly onto the rooftop of Mount Sinai Hospital. His Italian leather jacket fluttered in the wind, mirrored sunglasses reflecting the rising sun. "Mr. Blackwood!" shouted the doctor, running toward him as soon as his feet touched the ground. "You made it just in time. Your grandfather is—" Robert didn't wait for him to finish. He cut through the air with his hand, disconnected the rappelling equipment, and ran toward the hospital entrance like it was an action movie scene. Nurses threw themselves to the sides as he passed through the corridors, his magnetic presence causing an instant commotion. "Room 304, someone shouted behind him. Robert burst through the door like a hurricane, finding his grandfather, Theodore Blackwood, the real estate king of New York, connected to various medical devices. Beside the bed, a young woman with light brown hair and compassionate green eyes gently held the elderly man's hand. "Grandpa," Robert gasped, taking off his sunglasses. "I came as soon as I heard about the heart attack." Theodore slowly opened his eyes, a weak smile appearing on his lips. "Robert, my boy, what a dramatic entrance." "I'm sorry, sir," said the young woman with a soft voice and gentle Midwestern accent. "I'm Lydia Collins, your grandfather's private nurse. Maybe you should calm down a bit. He needs—" "I don't need anything except to talk to my grandson," Theodore interrupted, his voice still strong despite his frailty. "Lydia, dear, could you give us a few minutes?" Lydia hesitated, clearly worried about the patient's vital signs. "Mr. Blackwood, the doctor said that—" "The doctor can wait," Theodore smiled at her. "You're an angel, Lydia. But I need to speak with Robert alone." Lydia nodded reluctantly, casting a worried glance at Robert before leaving. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." As soon as the door closed, Theodore pointed to the nightstand drawer. "Open it. There's a sealed envelope." Robert opened the drawer, finding a thick envelope with the seal of the city's most prestigious law firm. "Grandpa, you're not going to die. The doctor said that—" "Robert," Theodore interrupted firmly. "Sit down and listen carefully." The millionaire playboy sat in the chair beside the bed, still breathing heavily from running through the corridors. "I'm going to die, Robert. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And when that happens, you'll inherit everything. The buildings, the companies, the bank accounts, everything." Robert felt momentary relief. "Grandpa, But—" Theodore raised his hand. "There's a condition." The smile disappeared from Robert's face. "What kind of condition?" "You have to marry Lydia." The silence that followed was so heavy it seemed like the air itself had stopped circulating in the room. Robert blinked several times as if he had heard wrong. What?" "You heard right," Theodore said, trying to sit up better in bed. "Lydia Collins, the nurse who's been taking care of me for 2 years. You're going to marry her or you won't inherit a single penny." Robert stood up abruptly, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "Grandpa, this is crazy. I don't even know this woman, and she's just a nurse." "Just a nurse?" Theodore arched an eyebrow. "This just a nurse helped me laugh again after your grandmother died. She taught me to live the last years of my life with dignity and joy." "But Grandpa, I have girlfriends. I have commitments. I have a life." "You have an empty life, Robert," Theodore said sadly. "Different women every week, parties every night, money thrown away on cars and jewelry. When was the last time you genuinely cared about someone?" Robert opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. "Lydia taught me what it means to care for someone unconditionally," Theodore continued. "She works 2 jobs to support her younger sister in college. Never asks for anything for herself. She's kind, funny, intelligent." "Grandpa, this is emotional blackmail." "No, Robert. This is love. Love for you and for our family." Theodore pointed to the envelope. "Open it." With trembling hands, Robert tore open the envelope and pulled out the documents. His eyes quickly scanned the pages until he found the clause that made his heart almost stop. The heir, Robert Blackwood, must marry Lydia Rose Collins within 30 days of the testator's death, maintaining the marriage for a minimum of 1 year, or lose all rights to the inheritance. which will be donated entirely to charitable institutions. He read aloud, incredulous. 30 days, Robert. And you'll live in the same house with her during that year. Robert felt his legs weaken. Grandpa, I can't. This is impossible. Impossible? Theodore smiled weakly. You rappelled down from a helicopter in the middle of Manhattan 10 minutes ago. Impossible is relative. At that moment, the door opened and Lydia entered discreetly, carrying a tray with tea. Sorry to interrupt, but I brought Mr. Theodore's chamomile tea. Robert turned to her, seeing her with completely different eyes. Brown hair tied in a simple ponytail, modest hospital uniform, no makeup, and yet there was something about her that... Lydia, dear, Theodore said. Come here. I need to tell you both something. Lydia approached, noticing the tension in the air. Is everything okay? Your vital signs are a bit elevated. I'm perfect, Theodore lied. Lydia, you know my grandson Robert. Nice to officially meet you. Lydia extended her hand with a warm smile. Your grandfather talks about you a lot. Robert shook her hand, feeling a strange electric current. It's, nice to meet you. Lydia, Theodore continued, I need you to sit down too. She sat in the chair on the other side of the bed, obviously worried. You two are going to get married. Lydia let out a small, nervous laugh. I'm sorry, Mr. Theodore, I don't think I understood correctly. It's not a joke, dear. Robert needs to marry you to inherit my fortune. And you... Theodore made a dramatic pause. You'll receive $500,000 for your time. Lydia went pale. Mr. Theodore, I can't accept this. This is... $500,000, Lydia, Theodore repeated. Enough to pay off your sister's college debts and still have enough left for you to start your own life. Robert watched Lydia process the information, seeing the conflict in her eyes. But this isn't right, she murmured. Marriage should be for love, not money. Sometimes love needs a little help to get started, Theodore smiled. You have more in common than you think. Robert let out a bitter laugh. Grandpa, we're from completely different worlds. Exactly, Theodore nodded. And that's why it's going to work. The heart monitor alarm began to sound. Lydia immediately stood up, checking Theodore's vital signs. Mr. Theodore, you're stressing yourself too much. You need to rest. I can't rest, he said, grabbing her hand. Not until I know Robert will be okay when I'm gone. Lydia looked at Robert, who was visibly in shock, then back at Theodore. Mr. Theodore, I need to think about this. Of course, dear. You have until tomorrow to decide. Tomorrow? Robert and Lydia exclaimed at the same time. We don't have much time, Theodore said simply. The doctors were very clear about my prognosis. Lydia felt tears forming in her eyes. Don't say that. Lydia, you brought light to my life when I thought there was only darkness. Theodore squeezed her hand. Let me return the favor. Robert watched the interaction between them, something stirring in his chest. The way Lydia cared for his grandfather, the genuine concern in her eyes. Grandpa, Robert said finally, this is insane. The best insanity of my life, Theodore smiled. Now you two get out of here and talk. You have a lot to discuss. Lydia stood up reluctantly. I'll ask the shift nurse to stay with you. No need, dear. I'm going to sleep a little. Theodore closed his eyes. Robert, take Lydia to dinner. Do this right. Robert and Lydia looked at each other, both still processing the bomb that had just exploded in their lives. So, Robert said when they reached the corridor, this is awkward at the very least. Lydia let out a nervous laugh. Awkward is an understatement. I don't even know what to say. How about we start with this is completely insane? This is completely insane, Lydia agreed. And for the first time, Robert saw a genuine smile on her face. And in that moment, as the two walked down the hospital corridor toward the biggest dilemma of their lives, neither of them could imagine that this was just the first page of a story that would change their lives forever. The will was sealed. The clock was ticking. And two completely different worlds were about to collide in a way that not even Theodore himself had predicted. The elevator ride down to the hospital lobby was possibly the most uncomfortable 2 minutes of Robert's life. And that was saying something, considering he'd once been trapped in an elevator with 3 ex-girlfriends and his mother. Lydia stood on the opposite side, fidgeting with her hospital badge while stealing glances at him. Robert kept checking his Rolex, wondering if time had somehow slowed down since his grandfather's bombshell announcement. "So," Lydia finally broke the silence. "This is weird." "Weird doesn't begin to cover it," Robert replied, loosening his tie. "I'm pretty sure there's a reality TV show somewhere that would pay millions for this footage." Despite herself, Lydia laughed. "What would they call it? The Millionaire and the Nurse?" "More like Grandfather Knows Best, The Revenge," Robert said, and was surprised when Lydia laughed again. Her laugh was nice, genuine, nothing like the practiced giggles he was used to from the socialites in his circle. The elevator dinged, and they stepped into the bustling hospital lobby. Robert immediately felt every eye turn toward them, or rather, toward him. His dramatic helicopter entrance had apparently made quite an impression. "Mr. Blackwood," a young resident approached them. "Is your grandfather—" "He's fine," Robert said curtly, then caught himself. Thank you for asking. He's resting." Lydia watched the interaction with interest. She'd seen Robert's type before, rich, entitled, used to getting their way. But there was something in his tone just now, a hint of genuine gratitude beneath the brusque exterior. "There's a nice Italian place about 6 blocks from here," Lydia suggested as they walked toward the exit. "Nothing fancy, but the food's good and it's quiet." Robert stopped walking. "You want to go to an Italian place?" "Well, you don't have to sound so horrified," Lydia said, a bit defensive. "I know it's probably not up to your usual standards, but—" No, Robert said quickly, realizing how he'd sounded. "I love Italian food. I usually go to places where you need a reservation 3 months in advance and they serve portions the size of golf balls." "Ah," Lydia nodded knowingly. "One of those places where they put 3 drops of sauce on a plate and call it deconstructed." "Exactly," Robert said, surprised by her understanding. "I once paid $200 for what I'm pretty sure was just really expensive air with a garnish." They walked in more comfortable silence until they reached Mama Rosa's, a cozy family restaurant with red checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic bread wafting from the kitchen. "Mr. Robert," the hostess, an elderly Italian woman, rushed over the moment they entered. "We heard about your grandfather. How is he?" Robert blinked, surprised. "You know my grandfather?" "Know him? Honey, he's been coming here every Tuesday for lunch for 15 years. Always orders the same thing, chicken parmigiana, and tells us stories about his real estate deals." She turned to Lydia. "And you must be the angel nurse he's always talking about." Lydia blushed. "He talks about me? Talks about you? Honey, he shows your picture to everyone. 'Look at my Lydia,' he says. 'She's got a heart bigger than Manhattan.'" Robert felt something twist in his chest. His grandfather had been coming to this little neighborhood restaurant for 15 years, and Robert had never known. What else didn't he know about the man who had raised him? Come, Mama Rosa said, leading them to a corner booth. "I'll bring you the good wine. Tonight everything's on the house for Theodore's family." As they settled into the booth, Robert found himself studying Lydia more closely. She thanked the waitress who brought them water, asked about the woman's daughter who was apparently in nursing school, and somehow managed to make everyone around her smile. "You're not what I expected," Robert said suddenly. Lydia looked up from her menu. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone more mercenary, I guess. Someone who'd jump at the chance to marry a millionaire for money." "Who says I'm jumping at the chance?" Lydia challenged. "Maybe I think this whole thing is as crazy as you do. But you're considering it." Lydia sighed, setting down her menu. "My sister Megan is a sophomore at Northwestern, pre-med. She's brilliant, Robert. Absolutely brilliant. But the debt. Even with scholarships and loans, we're looking at over $200,000 by the time she graduates. And you're supporting her alone?" Our parents died in a car accident when I was 22 and she was 15. I've been her guardian ever since. Lydia's voice was matter-of-fact, but Robert could hear the weight behind it. I work at the hospital during the day and at a medical clinic 3 nights a week. It's enough to cover her expenses, but just barely. Robert felt something shift in his chest. That's incredible. You were practically a kid yourself. I was old enough, Lydia said simply. She's my sister. What else was I going to do? The waitress appeared to take their order, and Robert watched as Lydia ordered modestly, just a pasta dish and water. Get whatever you want, Robert said. I'm buying. I can pay for my own dinner, Lydia said, a flash of pride in her eyes. I know you can, but humor me. After today, I think we both deserve a good meal. After the waitress left, Robert leaned back in the booth. So, what's your story with my grandfather? Besides the obvious caretaking? Lydia's expression softened. He's amazing. When I first started working for him, I thought he'd be like all the other wealthy clients, demanding, dismissive, treating me like furniture. But Theodore is different. He asks about my day, remembers things I tell him about Megan, and he's got this wicked sense of humor. Wicked sense of humor? Last week, he convinced the physical therapist that he was a former circus performer and needed to practice his tightrope walking. The poor woman spent 20 minutes trying to figure out how to accommodate that into his recovery plan. Robert laughed. A real laugh, not the polished chuckle he used at business meetings. That sounds like him. He once told my 3rd grade teacher that I was allergic to homework and needed to be excused from all assignments. Did it work? For about a week, until she called the house to discuss my condition with my parents. They shared a moment of comfortable laughter before the weight of their situation settled back over them. Robert, Lydia said carefully, can I ask you something? Shoot. Why do you think he's doing this, really? Robert was quiet for a long moment, considering. I think he's worried about me. And he's probably right to be. What do you mean? I don't have real relationships, Lydia. I date women who are more interested in my bank account than my personality. I work obsessively because it's easier than dealing with people. And I haven't had a meaningful conversation with anyone in, I can't remember how long. Until now? Lydia asked softly. Until now, Robert agreed, meeting her eyes. Their food arrived, and they ate in contemplative silence for a while. The pasta was incredible, far better than anything Robert had eaten at his usual 5-star establishments. This is really good, he said, surprised. Sometimes the best things aren't the most expensive, Lydia said with a small smile. Are you speaking metaphorically? Maybe a little. Robert set down his fork. Lydia, I need to be honest with you. I have no idea how to do this. I've never been in a real relationship, let alone a fake marriage. Well, I've never been in a fake marriage either, so we're even. But you have been in real relationships. Lydia's cheeks flushed slightly. Not many. Working 2 jobs and raising a teenager doesn't leave much time for dating. What about now? Are you seeing anyone? No, Lydia said quietly. The last guy I dated decided that my family responsibilities were too much baggage. His words, not mine. He sounds like an idiot. He was, Lydia agreed. But he wasn't wrong about the baggage. Dating me means dating my situation, my responsibilities. Not many guys are up for that. Robert found himself getting angry on her behalf. Their loss. Lydia looked at him with surprise. Thank you, that's nice of you to say. I mean it. What you've done for your sister, what you do for my grandfather, that's not baggage. That's character. They looked at each other across the table, and Robert felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine connection. So, Lydia said finally, if we did this crazy thing, what would it look like? Well, Robert said, pulling out his phone. According to the will, we have to be married within 30 days of Grandpa's death. We have to live together for a year. And it has to appear legitimate. Appear legitimate to whom? The executors of the will, his lawyer, his accountant, probably some private investigators to make sure we're not committing fraud. Are we committing fraud? Robert paused. Technically, yes. But morally? I'm not sure anymore. What do you mean? I mean, maybe my grandfather isn't as crazy as I thought. Maybe he's giving us both something we need. Which is? You need financial security. I need to learn how to be a real person. Lydia laughed. You're already a real person, Robert. Am I? When's the last time I did something for someone else without expecting something in return? When's the last time I had a conversation like this one? Like what? Honest. Real. Without any agenda except getting to know someone. Lydia considered this. So you're saying your grandfather might actually be helping us? I'm saying my grandfather is a lot smarter than I gave him credit for. They finished their meal in companionable silence, both lost in thought. As they prepared to leave, Mama Rosa approached their table. How was everything? She asked. Perfect, Lydia said sincerely. Thank you so much. You come back any time, Mama Rosa said, patting Lydia's hand. And you, she pointed at Robert, you take care of this one. Your grandfather would want that. Outside the restaurant, they walked slowly back toward the hospital where their cars were parked. So, Robert said, what's your answer? Lydia stopped walking. You really want to do this? I want to try. I want to see what happens when two people who have nothing in common except caring about the same old man try to make something work. Even if it's fake? Maybe it starts fake, Robert said, but maybe it doesn't have to stay that way. Lydia looked at him for a long moment. You're not what I expected either. Is that good or bad? It's hopeful. They reached the hospital parking garage and Robert realized he didn't want the evening to end. Lydia, he said, I have a confession. What? I've never been so nervous about anything in my life. I've closed billion-dollar deals. I've given presentations to boards of directors. I've been on live television. But the thought of trying to be a good husband, even a fake one, terrifies me. Lydia smiled. You want to know a secret? What? I've never been so excited about anything in my life. Terrified but excited. So is that a yes? Lydia took a deep breath. On one condition. What? We do this honestly. No games, no pretending to be people we're not. If we're going to fake a marriage, we might as well be real about everything else. Robert extended his hand. Deal. Lydia shook it. Deal. As they parted ways to their respective cars, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the hospital window above. Theodore Blackwood smiled to himself, satisfied with the evening's progress. Phase 1 complete, he murmured to himself, settling back into his hospital bed. Now for the fun part. Theodore Blackwood passed away peacefully on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after his ultimatum. Lydia was holding his hand when he took his last breath, and Robert arrived just minutes later to find her crying softly in the hospital chair. He said to tell you that the timer starts now, Lydia whispered, wiping her eyes, and that he loves you. Robert felt his world tilt. Despite everything, he'd somehow believed his grandfather would live forever, orchestrating their lives from his hospital bed like some benevolent puppet master. The funeral was magnificent, exactly the kind of send-off Theodore would have wanted. Half of Manhattan's elite showed up, along with dozens of people Robert had never seen before, nurses, doormen, restaurant owners, and others whose lives Theodore had touched. After the service, Robert's mother cornered him at the reception. Darling, who was that lovely girl you were sitting with? Victoria Blackwood was the epitome of Upper East Side sophistication, her steel gray hair perfectly coiffed, and her expression perpetually curious about her son's love life. That's Lydia, Robert said carefully. Grandpa's nurse. She's beautiful, very natural, not like those artificial creatures you usually date. Thanks, Mom. Your confidence in my judgment is overwhelming. Victoria studied him with the sharp eyes that had made her a force in New York society for 30 years. You like her? I barely know her. Robert Theodore Blackwood, I didn't raise you to lie to me. You like her." Before Robert could respond, Lydia appeared at his elbow, looking uncomfortable in her simple black dress among the designer-clad mourners. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said quietly. "The lawyer wants to see us." An hour later, they sat in the mahogany-paneled offices of Whitman, Burke and Associates, while Theodore's lawyer, Harold Whitman, read the will aloud to a room full of shocked relatives. "To my beloved grandson Robert, I leave everything, contingent upon his marriage to Miss Lydia Rose Collins within 30 days of my death." The uproar was immediate. "This is preposterous." Robert's cousin Marcus, ironically sharing the name with Robert's original identity, jumped up. Uncle Theodore was clearly not in his right mind. "The will is ironclad," Harold said calmly. "Theodore was examined by 3 psychiatrists. He was completely lucid." Robert's Aunt Patricia, a thin woman who looked like she'd been sucking lemons, turned her venom on Lydia. "You little gold digger, you manipulated a dying old man." "That's enough," Robert said sharply, surprising himself. "Lydia had nothing to do with this." "Oh, please," Patricia sneered. Sweet little nurse caring for the wealthy grandfather, whispering poison in his ear. "I said that's enough." Robert's voice was ice cold, and the room fell silent. "Anyone who has a problem with Grandpa's will can take it up with the courts, but you will not speak to Lydia that way." Lydia looked at him with surprise and something that might have been gratitude. After the chaos subsided and the relatives stormed out, Harold handed them each a thick folder. "Theodore left specific instructions," he said with a slight smile. "You have 23 days remaining. The marriage must be performed by a licensed officiant, with at least 2 witnesses. You must live together in the same residence for a minimum of 1 year, and you'll be subject to periodic observations." "Observations?" Lydia asked. "A private investigator will occasionally verify that you're living as a married couple. Nothing invasive, just confirmation that the marriage is legitimate." Walking out of the law office, Robert felt the weight of the next year settling on his shoulders. "Second thoughts?" Lydia asked. "Are you kidding? After what my family just put you through, I'm more determined than ever." "Your cousin seems nice," Lydia said dryly. "Marcus is an ass. Always has been. And Aunt Patricia, well, let's just say Grandpa had good reasons for not leaving her anything." They walked to Robert's car, a sleek black Mercedes that made Lydia whistle appreciatively. "Nice ride." "Thanks. Where to?" "I need to pick up some things from my apartment, and we should probably discuss living arrangements." 20 minutes later, Robert stood in Lydia's tiny studio apartment, feeling like he'd entered another world. The space was smaller than his walk-in closet, but it was warm and lived in, with plants on every surface and photos covering the walls. "It's not much," Lydia said, suddenly self-conscious. "It's nice," Robert said, and meant it. "It feels like a home." Lydia looked at him strangely. "What does your place feel like?" "A hotel. A very expensive, very empty hotel." While Lydia packed, Robert studied the photos. Most featured a young woman who looked like a younger version of Lydia, clearly the sister she'd mentioned. "Megan looks like you," he said. "Everyone says that." Lydia emerged from the bathroom with a toiletry bag. "She's smarter, though, and funnier. You'll like her." "I'm going to meet her?" "Well, she's coming to the wedding. I figured she should know that her sister is entering into a marriage of convenience with a millionaire playboy." "How did she take the news?" Lydia grinned. "She said, and I quote, 'Holy shit, Lydia, you hit the jackpot.' Then she asked if you have any single brothers." "Sorry to disappoint." I told her you probably have single friends." "I do. Fair warning. They're all terrible." "Perfect, she'll fit right in." As they loaded Lydia's belongings into Robert's car, she turned to him with a serious expression. "Robert, I need to ask you something. What kind of marriage are we going to have?" He paused in loading her suitcase. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are we going to be roommates who happen to be legally married? Are we going to pretend to be a couple in love? What's our story?" Robert considered this. "What do you want it to be?" "I want it to be honest. As honest as a fake marriage can be." "Meaning?" "Meaning we don't have to pretend to be madly in love, but we should at least try to be friends." Real friends. I'd like that, Robert said quietly. And, Lydia continued, her cheeks slightly pink, we need to discuss sleeping arrangements. Right. My place has 4 bedrooms. You can have whichever one you want. Thank you. I was worried you might expect to... No, Robert said quickly. Nothing like that. This is business, remember? But as he said it, Robert found himself wondering if that was entirely true anymore. The next morning, they met at City Hall to get their marriage license. The clerk, a bored-looking woman in her 50s, barely looked up as she processed their paperwork. Date of ceremony? Robert and Lydia looked at each other. This Saturday? Lydia suggested. This Saturday, Robert confirmed. Witnesses? My sister, Lydia said. And my assistant, Robert added. James will do it. As they walked out with their license, Lydia laughed suddenly. What's funny? I just realized we're planning our wedding, and we've known each other for exactly 9 days. When you put it like that, it does sound insane. Good thing we're both crazy. Saturday arrived with surprising speed. Robert had arranged for a simple ceremony in the garden of his penthouse, with just Megan, James, and a justice of the peace in attendance. Megan turned out to be everything Lydia had promised. Brilliant, funny, and completely unfazed by the unusual circumstances. So you're the millionaire my sister's fake marrying, she said, shaking Robert's hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. That's me. Good. She deserves someone who can take care of her for a change. Megan, Lydia warned. What? It's true. You've been taking care of everyone else your whole life. It's time someone took care of you. As they prepared for the ceremony, Robert found himself nervous in a way he hadn't expected. This was supposed to be fake, but standing there in his best suit, watching Lydia adjust her simple white dress, it felt surprisingly real. You clean up nice, Lydia said, smoothing his tie. You look beautiful, Robert replied, and was startled to realize he meant it. The ceremony itself was brief and to the point. When the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, Robert kissed Lydia's cheek gently and she blushed. Well, she said as they signed the marriage certificate, I guess we're really doing this. No backing out now, Mrs. Blackwood. Mrs. Blackwood, Lydia repeated wonderingly. That's going to take some getting used to. As their small wedding party celebrated with champagne on the terrace, Robert caught Megan watching him with calculating eyes. Penny for your thoughts, he said, joining her at the railing. Just wondering if my sister knows what she's gotten herself into. Meaning? Meaning you're not what I expected. Everyone keeps saying that. What did you expect? A selfish, spoiled rich boy who would use my sister and throw her away. Megan studied him. But you're not, are you? I'm trying not to be. Good, because if you hurt her, I'll destroy you. And I'm pre-med, so I know exactly how to do it. Robert laughed despite himself. I believe you. Good. Now tell me about these terrible single friends of yours. Living with Robert Blackwood, Lydia discovered, was like sharing space with a very polite, very wealthy alien who had studied human behavior but never quite mastered it. Good morning, wife, Robert said on their first Monday as a married couple, appearing in the kitchen dressed in a perfectly pressed suit at exactly 6:30 a.m. Good morning, husband, Lydia replied, trying not to laugh at the formal greeting. She was still in her pajamas, flannel pants with little cats on them that made Robert do a double take. I've prepared your breakfast, he announced proudly, gesturing to the counter. Lydia looked at the spread. Perfectly arranged fruit cut into geometric shapes, artisanal toast points, and what appeared to be caviar. Robert, she said gently, do you eat caviar for breakfast every day? Well, no, but I thought, you're my wife now, you should have the best. That's sweet, but I usually just grab a granola bar on my way to work. Robert looked genuinely shocked. A granola bar? That's not breakfast, that's sadness in wrapper form, says the man who eats fish eggs at dawn. Touché. By the end of the first week, they'd established some ground rules. Lydia took over breakfast duties after Robert's attempt at pancakes resulted in the fire department making a courtesy call. Robert handled dinner, which mostly involved ordering from restaurants that Lydia couldn't pronounce. "We need groceries," Lydia announced on Saturday morning, finding Robert in his study reviewing financial reports. "I'll have James pick some up." "James picks up your groceries?" "James picks up everything. It's efficient." "Robert, when's the last time you went to a grocery store?" Robert looked genuinely puzzled. "Do specialty markets count?" "No." "Then, never?" An hour later, Lydia was pushing a cart through the aisles of a regular supermarket, while Robert followed behind like a bewildered tourist. "Why is there so much cereal?" he asked, staring at an entire aisle of colorful boxes. "Because people like variety." "But there are 47 different types of the same thing." "Welcome to America, honey." The endearment slipped out before Lydia could stop it, and they both froze for a moment. Robert felt something warm unfurl in his chest at the casual intimacy. "Sorry," Lydia said quickly. "Force of habit." "It's fine," Robert said, and realized he meant it. "We should probably practice that kind of thing anyway. For the investigators." "Right. For the investigators." But neither of them was thinking about investigators when Robert insisted on pushing the cart, or when Lydia automatically reached for his arm while reading her shopping list, or when they both reached for the same box of pasta and their hands touched. "We should cook together sometime," Robert said as they loaded groceries into his car. "You want to cook?" "I want to learn. From you." "Robert, I'm not exactly a gourmet chef. You made scrambled eggs yesterday that were better than anything I've ever eaten at Le Bernardin. That's because I put cheese in them. See? You're brilliant." That evening, Lydia found herself teaching Robert how to make spaghetti carbonara in his state-of-the-art kitchen that he'd never actually used. "No, you have to whisk faster," she said, standing behind him as he struggled with the egg mixture. "Like this." She put her hands over his, guiding his movements, and suddenly they were very close, her chin almost resting on his shoulder. Robert caught a whiff of her shampoo, something simple and clean that made his head spin. "Better?" he asked, his voice slightly rough. "Much better," Lydia whispered, then stepped back quickly. "The pasta should be ready." They ate their slightly imperfect carbonara at Robert's massive dining table that could seat 12, candles flickering between them. "This is really good," Robert said. "It's not bad for a first attempt." "I meant this," Robert gestured between them. "Eating together, talking. It's nice." "Don't sound so surprised." "I am surprised. I thought marriage, even a fake one, would feel like a prison. But this feels... like what?" "Like home." 3 weeks into their arrangement, they were settling into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Robert left for work at 7, returned by 6. Lydia worked her hospital shifts, came home to find Robert either cooking or waiting with takeout. They ate together, watched Netflix. Robert's introduction to binge-watching was a revelation, and talked. They talked about everything. Robert's loneliness growing up wealthy but emotionally neglected. Lydia's fear that she wasn't doing enough for Megan. Their dreams, their regrets, their completely different views on everything from politics to pizza toppings. "Pineapple on pizza is an abomination," Robert declared during one particularly heated dinner debate. "Pineapple on pizza is delicious, you food snob." "I am not a food snob. You sent back wine last week because it was too presumptuous." "That's not being a snob, that's having standards." "Robert, you have a different water for each day of the week." "That's... okay, that might be slightly snobbish." It was during their 4th week that the first real test came. Lydia was in the shower when she heard voices in the living room. She quickly threw on a robe and found Robert with 2 people she didn't recognize. A stern-looking woman with a clipboard and a man with a camera. "Mrs. Blackwood," the woman said crisply. "I'm Detective Morrison and this is my associate, Mr. Chen. We're here to conduct the first verification of your marriage." Lydia's heart hammered. "Of course. Would you like some coffee?" "That won't be necessary. We just need to ask a few questions and take some photographs." For the next hour, they were grilled about their relationship. When did they meet? What was their first date? How did Robert propose? What side of the bed did each of them sleep on? Robert and Lydia had prepared for basic questions, but some caught them off guard. What's your wife's favorite breakfast, Mr. Blackwood? Robert panicked for a second, then remembered. Granola bars. But I'm trying to convince her that actual food is better. Detective Morrison made a note. And Mrs. Blackwood, what does your husband do when he's stressed? Lydia thought about the past few weeks. He reorganizes his closet. Everything has to be sorted by color and season. It's very specific. Robert looked at her in surprise. He hadn't realized she'd noticed. We'll need to see the bedroom, Detective Morrison said. Lydia led them to the master suite, grateful that she'd been using the guest room. But when they opened the closet, her heart sank. Robert's clothes were perfectly organized on one side, while the other side was completely empty. Interesting, Detective Morrison murmured, making another note. After they left, Robert found Lydia sitting on the couch looking pale. That was close, she said. Too close. We need to do better. What do you mean? I mean, we need to actually look like we're married, starting with the bedroom. Lydia's eyes widened. Robert, we agreed. I'm not talking about sharing a bed, he said quickly. I'm talking about making it look like we share a bedroom. Your clothes in the closet, your things on the nightstand if they come back. You're right, Lydia said, though the thought of moving into Robert's bedroom made her nervous for reasons she didn't want to examine too closely. That evening they moved Lydia's belongings into the master suite. Robert insisted she take the walk-in closet's prime real estate. This is your space now too, he said, hanging her dresses next to his suits. Where will you sleep? Lydia asked, looking at the massive king-sized bed. I'll take the couch in my study. Robert, that's ridiculous. The bed is huge. We can share it like adults. Robert froze. Are you sure? We're both capable of sleeping in the same bed without, Besides, if the investigators come back unexpectedly, it'll look more natural. That night, they lay in bed with about 3 feet of space between them, both staring at the ceiling. This is weird, Lydia said finally. Very weird. Good weird or bad weird? Robert turned his head to look at her in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Her hair was spread across the pillow, and she looked young and vulnerable and beautiful. Good weird, he said softly. Good weird, she agreed. But as Lydia drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that this arrangement was becoming more complicated than either of them had planned. And when she woke up the next morning to find Robert's arm draped over her waist and her head on his chest, she realized that fake marriage was starting to feel very, very real. Robert woke up first, instantly aware of Lydia's warm weight against him. He should move, he knew. Should put distance between them before she woke up and felt awkward. Instead, he stayed perfectly still, memorizing the feeling of her breathing against his chest, the way her hair tickled his chin, the scent of her skin. For the first time in his adult life, Robert Blackwood didn't want to be anywhere else. 2 months into their marriage, Robert and Lydia had fallen into a rhythm so natural that they sometimes forgot it was supposed to be fake. Robert brought Lydia coffee in bed every morning. Lydia left little notes in Robert's lunch when he had important meetings. They argued about whose turn it was to pick the Netflix show and fell asleep talking about their days. It was becoming dangerous how real it felt. The crisis began on a Thursday evening when Lydia came home from work to find Robert pacing in his study, his hair disheveled and his tie loosened. Sure signs of stress. Bad day? She asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. The worst, Robert said, not looking up from the papers scattered across his mahogany desk. The Peterson deal fell through. The board is breathing down my neck about quarterly projections, and my mother called 3 times to ask when we're having children. Lydia laughed despite his obvious frustration. What did you tell her? That we're practicing a lot but haven't quite figured it out yet. Robert. Lydia felt her cheeks burn. What? It bought us time. Robert finally looked at her and his expression softened. Sorry, I know this isn't what you signed up for. My family treating you like a real daughter-in-law. Actually, I kind of like your mother. Everyone likes my mother, She's terrifying in the most charming way possible. The phone on Robert's desk rang, and he glanced at the caller ID with a grimace. Speaking of terrifying women, it's my lawyer. Robert, Harold Whitman's voice came through the speakerphone. We have a problem. Lydia started to leave, but Robert gestured for her to stay. What kind of problem, Harold? Your cousin Marcus is contesting the will. He's hired a team of investigators, and they found something. Robert's face went pale. Found what? Evidence that your marriage might not be legitimate. They have photos of you both entering and leaving separate bedrooms for the first 3 weeks of your marriage. They also have testimony from hospital staff that Lydia was asking about the will's contents weeks before Theodore's death. Lydia felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. That's not true. I believe you, Harold said gently, but they're building a case that this was premeditated fraud. They're claiming Lydia manipulated Theodore into changing his will, then seduced you into the arrangement. That's ridiculous, Robert said hotly. Maybe, but they have enough to tie this up in court for years. And if they can prove fraud, we lose everything, Robert finished quietly. After Harold hung up, the study fell into heavy silence. Lydia stared at her hands, feeling the weight of the accusations. Lydia, Robert said softly, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, and he saw the hurt there. I don't believe a word of it, he said firmly. But what if the court does? Then we fight. With what? Robert, I can't afford lawyers. I can barely afford groceries without my paycheck. You don't need to afford anything. This is my fight. Lydia stood up abruptly. No, this is exactly the problem. It's always your fight, your money, your world. I'm just the charity case you married to get your inheritance. That's not true, isn't it? Lydia's voice was rising. You've been taking care of me since day one. The fancy dinners, the expensive sheets, the designer clothes you keep buying me. I'm just another problem you're solving with money. Lydia, you're being ridiculous. Am I? When's the last time you let me pay for anything? When's the last time you treated me like an equal instead of a beautiful obligation? Robert stood up, his own frustration boiling over. You want to be treated like an equal? Fine. Let's be honest about what this really is. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're in love with me. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Lydia felt her heart stop, then start again at double speed. That's not, isn't it? Robert moved around the desk, stepping closer. The way you look at me when you think I'm not watching, the way you curl up against me in your sleep, the way you get jealous when my assistant calls. I don't get jealous, Lydia said weakly. You asked me last week if Sarah was pretty. That was just conversation. Bullshit. Robert was close enough now that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. You're in love with me, and it terrifies you because this was supposed to be business. Stop. And you know what the really scary part is? Robert's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I'm in love with you too. Lydia felt tears start to form. Robert, I wake up every morning grateful that you're there. I rush home from work because I can't wait to hear about your day. I lie awake at night watching you sleep and wondering how I got so lucky. This isn't real, Lydia said desperately. This whole situation, it's not real. It's just proximity and convenience and what? You think I'm some kind of emotional invalid who can't tell the difference between love and obligation? I think you're a man who's never had to work for anything in his life, and now you think you can buy a wife like you'd buy a car. The moment the words left her mouth, Lydia knew she'd gone too far. Robert's face closed off completely, the warm man who'd been making her coffee every morning disappearing behind the cold mask of the billionaire CEO. I see, he said quietly. So in your professional opinion, Dr. Collins, my feelings are just the result of wealth and privilege? That's not what I meant, isn't it? Because it sounds like you think I'm incapable of genuine emotion, that everything I feel for you is just some rich boy playing house. Robert, please. You know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe this whole thing has been a mistake. Robert walked back to his desk, suddenly looking exhausted. Maybe we should cut our losses. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we should get divorced. Give Marcus what he wants. You can take the money Theodore left you and start over. Lydia felt the bottom drop out of her world. You want a divorce? I want whatever makes you happy. And clearly being married to me doesn't. That's not... I never said that. You didn't have to. Robert sat down heavily in his chair. I'll have Harold draw up the papers. You can stay here until you find a place. Robert, I'm tired, Lydia. Can we just not do this right now? Lydia stood in the doorway for a long moment, wanting to say something, anything, that would take back the last 10 minutes. But the words wouldn't come. She found herself walking to the guest room, their old arrangement suddenly feeling like the right choice. She packed a bag with trembling hands, her mind racing. Had she just destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to her because she was too scared to admit she loved him? Downstairs, she could hear Robert on the phone with his lawyer, his voice cold and professional as he discussed divorce proceedings. Each word felt like a knife in her chest. She was halfway to the door when her phone rang. Megan's face appeared on the screen. Hey sis, I was just calling to thank Robert again for the tuition payment. I can't believe he... Lydia? Are you crying? Megan, I think I just made the biggest mistake of my life. Where are you? I'm coming over. An hour later, Lydia sat in a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from Robert's building, crying into a cup of coffee while Megan listened to the whole story. Let me get this straight, Megan said when Lydia finished. You're in love with your husband, he's in love with you, and you're getting divorced because... Why exactly? Because it's not real, Megan. The whole foundation of our relationship is built on money and obligation. So what? Mom and Dad met at a business conference. Sarah met Mike on a dating app. Love is love, Lydia. It doesn't matter how it starts. But what if he only thinks he loves me because I was convenient? What if when this whole inheritance thing is over, he realizes he doesn't actually want to be married to a nurse from Ohio? What if he doesn't? What if he really loves you and you just threw it away because you're terrified of being happy? Lydia looked at her sister, brilliant, practical Megan who always saw straight to the heart of things. I'm scared, Lydia whispered. Of course you are. Love is terrifying. But you know what's more terrifying? Regret. What should I do? Go home. Tell him you're sorry. Tell him you love him. And stop being an idiot. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Megan reached across the table and took her sister's hands. Lydia, you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. When's the last time you let someone take care of you? That's just it. I don't want to be taken care of. I want to be a partner. So be one. Go home and fight for your marriage. Show him you're not just some charity case he married. Show him you're the woman he fell in love with. Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Robert sat alone in his study, staring at the divorce papers Harold had already messengered over. All he had to do was sign them, and this whole chapter of his life would be over. He should be relieved. No more pretending, no more complicated emotions, no more worrying about fraud investigations. So why did he feel like his heart had been ripped out of his chest? His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Bring Lydia to brunch Sunday. I want to show her off to the book club ladies. Robert closed his eyes, realizing that losing Lydia meant losing the life they'd built together. The morning coffee, the evening talks, the way she made him laugh, the way she challenged him to be better. He'd been an idiot. She was scared. Of course she was scared. Their entire relationship had been backwards from the start. But instead of reassuring her, he'd gotten defensive and proud. Just as he reached for his phone to call her, he heard the front door open. Robert? Lydia's voice echoed through the apartment. He found her standing in the foyer, her hair wind-blown and her eyes red from crying. I thought you left, he said. I did. I came back. Why? Lydia took a deep breath. Because I'm in love with you, and I'm tired of being scared. Because I'm in love with you, and I'm tired of being scared. The words hung between them in the marble foyer, and Robert felt his heart restart after what felt like hours of not beating. "Lydia?" "No. Let me finish," she said, stepping closer. "I've been terrified from day one, terrified that this wasn't real, terrified that you'd wake up and realize you made a mistake, terrified that I was just another problem you were solving with money." Robert opened his mouth to speak, but she held up her hand. "But I was wrong. This whole time I was so focused on how we started that I forgot to pay attention to what we became." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her voice was steady. "You don't love me because it's convenient, Robert. You love me because somewhere along the way, we stopped pretending and started living." "You came back," he said softly. "I came back because Megan reminded me that I'm an idiot." Lydia laughed through her tears. "And because I realized that being scared of love is no way to live." Robert crossed the space between them in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I got defensive instead of listening. I'm sorry I made you feel like a charity case when you're the strongest person I know. I'm sorry I ran away instead of fighting for us. Are you fighting now?" "I'm fighting now." Robert kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of 2 months' worth of suppressed feelings. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lydia smiled up at him. "So what now? We still have Marcus's investigation to deal with. Now we prove that this marriage is real. Starting with this." Robert pulled out his phone and dialed Harold's number. "Harold? It's Robert. Tear up those divorce papers on—" "No, we're not getting divorced. We're going to fight this thing." "Yes, I'm sure." He hung up and turned back to Lydia. "Harold wants to meet with us tomorrow morning. We need to prepare for what could be a long legal battle." "Robert," Lydia said carefully, "I need you to know that I don't care about the money. If we lose the inheritance, it doesn't change how I feel about you." "I know, and that's exactly why we're going to win." The next morning they sat in Harold's office while he outlined Marcus's case against them. "They have photos, timeline discrepancies, and testimony suggesting fraud," Harold said grimly. "But they also have one major weakness." "Which is?" Robert asked. "They're arguing that your relationship isn't genuine. But anyone who's seen you two together would know that's ridiculous." "What do you mean?" Lydia asked. Harold smiled. "I mean the way Robert looks at you like you hung the moon, the way you automatically straighten his tie when he's nervous, the way you finish each other's sentences. That's not something you can fake for months on end." "So what's our strategy?" Robert asked. "We prove the relationship is real. Character witnesses, evidence of genuine affection, documentation of your life together. And—" Harold paused dramatically. "We have Theodore's final video message." "What video message?" Lydia asked. Harold pressed play on his laptop, and suddenly Theodore's face filled the screen, looking healthier than he had in his final weeks. "If you're watching this," Theodore's voice said, "it means someone is challenging my will. Let me be very clear. I was of sound mind when I wrote those terms, and I knew exactly what I was doing." Robert felt his throat tighten at the sight of his grandfather. "Marcus," Theodore continued, staring directly into the camera, "if this is you, then shame on you. You're challenging my will not because you think there was fraud, but because you're a greedy little boy who never learned that money can't buy character." Lydia squeezed Robert's hand. "Robert, my boy, I hope by now you understand why I did this. I didn't match you with Lydia because I was a meddling old man. I matched you because I could see what you couldn't, that you were both exactly what the other needed." Theodore's expression softened. "Lydia, my dear, you taught an old man how to laugh again. You showed me that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. And you helped my grandson find his heart." The video continued for several more minutes, with Theodore detailing his observations about their compatibility and his hopes for their future. "He planned everything," Lydia whispered when it ended. "Down to the last detail." Harold agreed. This video, combined with the right witnesses, should be enough to shut down Marcus's case. 3 weeks later, they sat in a Manhattan courthouse as Harold presented their defense. Marcus's lawyers had painted a picture of a gold-digging nurse and a desperate playboy, but Harold systematically dismantled their arguments. Megan testified about the change she'd seen in her sister since the marriage. "Lydia glows now," she told the court. "She laughs more, she's happier, she's in love." Victoria Blackwood took the stand next, her testimony carrying the weight of Manhattan society. "I've known my son for 32 years, she said crisply, "and I've never seen him truly happy until he married Lydia. That girl didn't trap him. She saved him." But it was Mama Rosa who provided the most compelling testimony. "Mr. Theodore, he bring Robert to the restaurant 6 months ago," she said in her accented English. "He say, 'Rosa, I want you to meet my grandson. He's lost, but I think I know how to help him find his way.'" The judge listened intently as Mama Rosa continued. "Then he bring the beautiful nurse girl, sweet Lydia, with the kind eyes. And Mr. Theodore, he say to me, 'Rosa, what you think? They perfect for each other, no?' And I look at them and I see it too." When Robert and Lydia took the stand together, their testimony was simple and honest. They talked about morning coffee and grocery shopping and learning to live together. They admitted the marriage had started as an arrangement but had become real. "Your Honor," Robert said, "I didn't marry Lydia for love, but I love her now, and I'd marry her again tomorrow for no other reason than that." The judge deliberated for 2 hours before returning with his decision. "While the circumstances of this marriage are certainly unusual," he said, "I find no evidence of fraud. The will stands, and the marriage is recognized as legitimate." Marcus stormed out of the courtroom, but Robert barely noticed. He was too busy kissing his wife. 6 months later, they renewed their vows in the garden of Robert's penthouse, surrounded by everyone who mattered. This time, Lydia wore a real wedding dress, nothing too fancy but beautiful in its simplicity. Robert couldn't take his eyes off her. "Do you, Robert, take Lydia to be your wife for real this time?" the officiant asked with a smile. "I do. Forever this time." "And do you, Lydia, take Robert to be your husband, knowing full well what you're getting into?" Lydia laughed. "I do, crazy as it sounds." At the reception, Robert found Lydia on the terrace, looking out over the city lights. "No regrets?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Only one," she said, leaning back against his chest. "What's that?" "I wish your grandfather could have been here to see this." "He is here," Robert said softly. "I can feel him laughing at how perfectly his crazy plan worked out." As if summoned by his words, a gentle breeze rustled through the garden, and they both smiled. "Thank you, Grandpa," Robert whispered. Later that night, as they lay in bed, their bed, no pretense needed, Lydia traced patterns on Robert's chest. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked. "Always. I think I started falling in love with you during that first dinner at Mama Rosa's. When you defended me against your family at the lawyer's office, I was a goner. Can I tell you a secret? Always. I knew I was in love with you the morning I woke up with you in my arms and didn't want to be anywhere else in the world." "When was that?" "The first time we shared a bed. I've been pretending ever since that this was still fake." Lydia propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "So we've both been idiots. Complete idiots. Good thing your grandfather was smarter than both of us." "The smartest man I ever knew," Robert agreed, pulling her down for a kiss. Epilogue. 1 year later, the Blackwood Foundation's annual charity gala was in full swing, with Manhattan's elite gathered to raise money for nursing education scholarships, Lydia's pet project, and Robert's way of honoring both his wife and his grandfather's memory. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert said from the podium, "I'd like to introduce someone who needs no introduction, my brilliant, beautiful, stubborn wife, who insisted we fund not just the scholarships, but also a program to help working nurses advance their education." Lydia joined him on stage wearing a stunning navy dress that made Robert's mouth go dry even after a year of marriage. "When Robert and I got married," she said into the microphone, "it was for all the wrong reasons. But sometimes the wrong reasons lead you to exactly the right place." The crowd chuckled, many of them having followed the very public court case with great interest. "Tonight, we're honoring the nurses who care for our loved ones with the same dedication they show their own families," And we're honoring a man who believed that love could bloom anywhere, even in the most unlikely circumstances. She looked at Robert, who was watching her with the same expression of adoration he'd worn since their second wedding. Theodore Blackwood knew that the best marriages aren't built on convenience or compatibility charts. They're built on two people who choose each other every single day, who grow together instead of apart, and who aren't afraid to love with their whole hearts. The applause was thunderous, but Robert only heard Lydia's voice. "I love you, Mrs. Blackwood," he whispered as they left the stage. "I love you too, Mr. Blackwood." Still feels weird to say it out loud. "Good weird or bad weird?" "The best weird," she said, echoing their conversation from that first awkward night sharing a bed. As they danced later that evening, surrounded by friends and family, Robert thought about the journey that had brought them here. A helicopter landing, a crazy will, a fake marriage that became the most real thing in his life. "What are you thinking about?" Lydia asked, following his gaze to the large portrait of Theodore that hung in the ballroom. "I'm thinking that Grandpa would be proud. Of the foundation? Of us. Of what we built together." Lydia smiled, the same radiant smile that had captured his heart in a hospital corridor over a year ago. "We built something pretty amazing, didn't we?" "We built everything," Robert said, spinning her around the dance floor. "And we're just getting started." Above them, the stars twinkled over Manhattan, and somewhere in the universe, an old man who had loved them both smiled and finally rested easy, knowing his greatest masterpiece, their love story, was complete. The end.